Shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this unique unit deep dive, we're going to be taking a look at the Burmese Arambai. A dart-throwing mounted unit might seem a little odd at first, but believe it or not, this is a pretty historically accurate unit. Technically, it was used against the Burmese Empire, so that part isn't quite right, but it's in the right region and adds something visually interesting to the battlefield, so you can see why it jumped out as the choice for a unique unit in the game. The fact that darts were poisoned can also be used as the justification for its high attack, and maybe the only way AoE2 misses the mark is in reality they're noted for being exceptionally accurate, whereas in AoE2 they're the third least accurate unit in the game after trebuchets and fire ships. To start with the unit stats at a glance, they have a decent 80 HP after bloodlines, 12 attack, 5 range, pretty average attack rate, and decent speed. Their cost is on the higher end at 75 wood and 60 gold compared to say a cavalry archer at 40 wood and 60 gold as a baseline for comparison. Overall, the cavalry archer comparison is a reasonable starting place, but in other ways I'd say they're a bit more like the conquistador. Not only do they have similar HP, both have relatively high pierce attack and similar range and speed, while also sharing relatively low accuracy, with Arambai taking that to an extreme level. Still, that stat looked at in isolation can be quite misleading and appear to be a massive weakness, when in fact at times it's an advantage attacking large groups. An important thing to note is that unlike conquistadors, when a missed Arambai shot lands, it still does full damage instead of half, and also reloads much faster. So the fact it has a lower base attack and accuracy than a conquistador doesn't necessarily mean it's doing less damage in practice. The Arambai then has a reasonably quick 18-second creation time compared to 24 for conquistadors, 25 for camel archers, and 26 for Mangudai, so it's not as hard to mass as some other mounted ranged units. In terms of bonus damage, their only bonus is +2 against rams, which becomes the only damage they get through considering they deal pierce damage that's otherwise completely negated by armor. On the other hand, they take lots of bonus damage from anything anti-archer, anti-cavalry, or anti-cavalry archer. As we'll see, they probably don't have to worry too much about the melee units here. It's mostly the ranged units, like skirmishers and camel archers, that are the main concern. The fact they deal pierce damage also makes them relatively poor against buildings, and while you might think their high attack would help, and against things like palisade walls and houses they will do 2 to 3 times the damage of a cavalry archer, they still won't be close to the damage of typical melee units. If you have any doubts about the ability of darts to damage a house, clearly you don't have an unprotected dartboard at home. Now, one built-in advantage they have is there are very few upgrades that you need to pick up. Burmese only have one relevant blacksmith tech in the first archer armor, bloodlines and husbandry at the stable of course, chemistry and ballistics at the university, Parthian tactics at the archery range for more armor and bonus against spears, and of course an elite upgrade. Note that mana per cavalry at the castle does not affect Arambai, and that's just for stable units to give them more attack against archers. That can be great for hussars or cavaliers who mix in with Arambai, but does nothing for Arambai themselves. Also, note that the blacksmith attack upgrades don't give the Arambai more attack or range, as another bit of overlap with the conquistador. It also has a pretty short attack delay, somewhere between a cavalry archer and Mangudai, making it feel decent but not perfectly responsive to micro. Still, hit and run is a very powerful tool with this unit. So that's a quick overview of what it brings to the table, but now let's get into its most unique feature, which is the impact of its poor accuracy, and what that actually translates to in different situations. If you take its 20% accuracy at face value and assume it's only doing 20% of its advertised attack, you're going to grossly underestimate how good this unit is. To start with a general sense of its accuracy, something I'm sure you've noticed is accuracy goes up at short range, as even when a unit misses, it can miss at a small enough angle to hit the target anyway when they're up close. At 1 tile range, it's functionally 100% accurate, and you'll often see players go right up to point blank range like this to guarantee a unit will be focused down. Notice the accuracy drops off pretty quickly though, missing almost a third of the time if there's 1 extra tile added, and goes down from there to only a little better than its advertised 20% accuracy at the maximum 5 range. If we have the Arambai target a large group of infantry, always aiming at the front center unit from different distances, while they don't always hit the intended target, if you add up all the damage dealt over a large sample size at a 3 tile range or less, you'll find 100% of the damage is absorbed by some unit in the group, at least with line formation. In a practical situation where you're attacking with 10 or 20 Arambai at once, that means not just most or all of the damage is getting through, but is even being spread out to a degree, which actually helps avoid overkill. As the distance increases to 4 or 5 tiles, I found a slight drop off to 88 and 83% of shots hitting something. And particularly at the maximum range, there starts to be a lot of different units hit, going from 5 to 12 units, taking some sort of damage over 500 volleys. I don't want to oversell it, but that can almost make a group of Arambai act like a mangonel at their maximum range, even if they don't technically deal area damage. The obvious response by the samurai here would be, of course, to switch to staggered formation, and I looked into that as it's a very natural feeling idea, but it turns out it doesn't really help as much as you might think. Optimistically, you might even expect it would lead to up to half of shots missing, but it seems at pretty much any range, about 80% of the damage still gets through to one unit or another. In all cases, it did technically help a tiny bit, so it certainly doesn't hurt, but it's not the silver bullet against Arambai you might have hoped for. The takeaways of all of this are against individual units, you really need to be up close for maximum effect, but against large groups, at least 3/4 of your damage is still counting, regardless of range and enemy formation. And the Arambai's low accuracy in that case, if anything, actually helps avoid overkill by having a bit of a shotgun effect. Next though, let's take a look at a few key matchups against popular units and illustrate some of these strengths and weaknesses to watch out for. Maybe the most significant is how they do against knights. Obviously, if you just abandon your Arambai to stand in place against an equivalent army of knights, you're really doing your units a disservice. But even without micro, the knights only end with roughly a third of their HP left over. Adding any level of micro, the result quickly reverses, and especially with a group of 15 Arambai that can start to one-shot knights up close, they really do have a major advantage. I don't want to peak too early, but this is arguably their best use case, tenderizing knights from a distance and then punching through their armor up close. With micro, you can end up with even 2/3 of the Arambai's HP left over from a similar starting point. That said, while similar in many ways, camels are much more dangerous than knights. That's partly bonus damage and their slightly cheaper cost, but camels are also critically 12% faster than Arambai, so hit and run becomes less effective, and even with micro, Arambai are lucky to even take a balanced fight. Of course, switching to infantry, Arambai generally are a great unit here, similar to conquistadors or many cavalry archer style units. As long as you're using micro or a meat shield in front, they're pretty effective against pikemen, and the Arambai's high attack also means they aren't shut down by high pierce armor infantry like Huskarls, Eagles, and Ghulams, often dealing double the damage per shot you get out of a more generic mounted archer. It's another case where comparison to gunpowder, and especially the conquistador, really feels apt. Now while they do well generally against melee units, ranged units on the other hand can often give them trouble. For example, even up close, if we ignore the crossbow having 2 extra range and much better accuracy, Arambai are just outclassed with equal resources, while also being much harder to mass from castles. Elite skirmishers are then even more dangerous, given they have solid pierce armor, still outrange Arambai, and also deal large amounts of bonus damage. With balanced resources, Arambai are completely destroyed, and even at close range with balanced numbers, while Arambai can technically win, they actually come out worse in terms of losses, despite a massive starting advantage. The fact is, Arambai are similar in cost to knights, so they're often pop efficient even if they're far from cost efficient in some of these important matchups. That's true against cavalry archers as well, where they win with equal numbers, but even up close and ignoring the cavalry archer's range advantage, it's still not a great trade. In fact, it's kind of hard to find ranged units they excel against, though one case is arguably mangonels, as they deal 3 times a cavalry archer's damage and 6 times a crossbow's damage per shot, where in theory 7 Arambai can one-shot a mangonel, assuming you can weave and dodge to get close enough. Even monks are a debatable counter, getting into the ultimate RNG battle. Especially given the Arambai's high cost, in small numbers, monks can be a very good way to deter raiding, though likewise a small handful of Arambai can also one-shot them up close, so it's another interesting dynamic. The common theme in all of this is if the enemy has 6 or more range, it probably counters the Arambai, and if it's melee, the Arambai will often have the edge. Another more debatable strength is when it comes to raiding, where they have the reach of a cavalry archer and high damage, but are really not my favorite raiding unit. Their low accuracy and weakness to town center fire makes them less consistent than many other cavalry archer unique units, but they can do the job. So those are some general ideas about what they're good and weak against, with a lot of debatable cases depending on micro. And now let's talk about what if anything changes in the Imperial Age. As we saw earlier, there aren't that many upgrades to consider here, with chemistry giving +1 attack, Parthian tactics adding a bit of armor and bonus against halberdiers, as well as an elite upgrade, comprising the entire list. The elite upgrade is on the slightly more expensive side and adds 5 HP, +2 attack, an increase from 20 to 30% accuracy, and +1 pierce armor, bringing them to a maximum of 5, with Parthian tactics in there as well, which is pretty good for a unit that only gets 1 armor upgrade at the blacksmith. Arguably, more accuracy means less of that scattershot area effect, but in practice it never feels like the unit is actually getting worse with the upgrade. Given its modest changes in the Imperial Age, most of the dynamics against other units don't change, though a really important one I want to highlight is how they hold up against the Knight line. Remember, they were pretty good against Knights, with even pedestrian micro, and 15 were able to one-shot a Knight. That's basically true for Cavaliers in Imperial Age as well, taking a nearly identical 16 shots with all upgrades. Paladins are a slightly different story though, taking almost 50% more thanks to their higher armor and HP. That said, at close range, Arambai aren't just better than crossbows and cavalry archers, but even deal more damage against paladins than hand cannons, so they're still your best ranged weapon against paladins in a team game. Otherwise, Imperial Age is a lot of the same strength against melee and high armor targets, while having difficulties against massed ranged units. And with so many potential counters, from arbalests to skirmishers to siege, it can help to think a bit more holistically about the Burmese tech tree to offset those weaknesses. One of the classic army compositions for the Burmese late game does exactly that, pairing Arambai with Hussars, which is particularly nice given mana per cavalry lets Hussars deal +4 extra attack against archers, skirmishers, and cavalry archers, while also not competing with the Arambai's gold cost. Swapping them out for Burmese Cavaliers would be the more expensive upgrade to this idea, if gold income permits, though for a less mobile but much more tanky alternative, you can use battle elephants to soak up arrows, with Burmese extra armor letting those take over 300 arbalester arrows each. What this gives up in mobility can be more than offset with just raw stats, and also trample damage of the elephants. On the other hand, against a very paladin or camel-heavy army, Burmese halberdiers can come into play, being not just fully upgraded, but also have +3 attack from a civ bonus, which for a unit with 6 base attack is a pretty big deal, and can effectively even just out-muscle enemy halberdiers head-to-head. In all these cases, what the Arambai contributes is a lot of damage and mobility to the mix, with bombard cannons nicely filling an anti-siege and anti-building role. There's nothing more satisfying than seeing Arambai darts and bombard cannons floating through the air, raining massive damage on your squishy foes. Speaking of which, if you like throwing things, and this video is giving you that itch, you're really going to want to check out my new online store, Spirit of the Lob, where anything you can throw can be found here. Darts, baseballs, shot put, dwarves, if you can toss it, we got it. It even has a great website I made in minutes thanks to this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Whether you're just starting or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create a great-looking website, engage with your audience, and then sell anything from products to content to time all in one place. Using either their pre-made templates or Squarespace's AI-enhanced website builder, you can create a fully customized website to suit your needs. It's perfect for building an online presence for a physical business or starting an online store using their built-in tools for inventory and shipping, with plenty of analytics to give you insight about your website's traffic and sales. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/spiritofthelaw to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So that's a look at the Burmese unique unit. Arambai for now, and I'll see you next time.